Today, we have a timely and important topic to discuss: surviving high inflation. Inflation can be a challenging time for everyone, but our grandparents lived through similar economic periods and came out on top. Their wisdom and frugal habits can teach us valuable lessons on how to navigate these uncertain times. So let's dive in and learn from the best. Grandma's 20 best money tips for surviving high inflation. Chapter 1. Managing expenses. Tip number 1. Budgeting is key. Grandma understood the importance of budgeting, especially during times of high inflation. She would meticulously track her income and expenses, creating a detailed budget that accounted for every dollar. By prioritizing essential needs and cutting back on discretionary spending, she could stretch her limited resources and make every penny count. Next up, tip number 2. Focus on needs, not wants. During high inflation, it's crucial to distinguish between needs and wants. Grandma would prioritize necessary expenses like food, housing, and healthcare while cutting back on non-essential purchases. This mindset helped her allocate resources wisely and focus on what truly mattered. Moving on to tip number 3. Slash your expenses. When facing rising prices, Grandma would find creative ways to reduce her expenses. She would look for discounts, buy generic brands, and negotiate for lower prices. By actively seeking ways to save, she could stretch her budget further and maintain her standard of living. Tip number 4 is smart grocery shopping. Grandma was a master at stretching her grocery budget. She would carefully plan meals around affordable ingredients, buy in bulk when possible, and take advantage of sales and coupons. Additionally, she would often grow her own vegetables or participate in community gardens to supplement her food supply and save money on fresh produce. Next, we have tip number 5, DIY and repairs. Grandma knew the value of doing things herself. Instead of hiring professionals, she would tackle small repairs and maintenance tasks on her own. From fixing leaky faucets to mending clothes, her DIY skills saved her money and empowered her to be self-reliant. Now, let's explore Grandma's tips for saving and investing during times of high inflation. Chapter 2. Saving and investing. We'll get to that in a second. I have a favor to ask of you. If you like this video so far, please subscribe to the channel. Tip number 6. Build an emergency fund. Grandma understood the importance of having a financial safety net, especially during times of economic uncertainty. She would save diligently, setting aside a portion of her income for emergencies. This fund provided her with peace of mind and protected her from relying on high-interest debt when unexpected expenses arose. Next up, tip number 7, invest in tangible assets. During high inflation, Grandma would often invest in tangible assets like real estate, precious metals, or commodities. These investments acted as a hedge against inflation, preserving her purchasing power and offering potential returns. Grandma knew that diversifying her portfolio with tangible assets was a smart financial move. Moving on to tip number 8, diversify your investments. Grandma knew the importance of diversification to mitigate risks. She would spread her investments across different asset classes such as stocks, bonds, and real estate. This diversified portfolio helped protect her wealth from the volatility of inflation and ensured she had multiple streams of income. Tip number 9 is explore high-yield savings accounts. Grandma would research and compare different savings accounts to find the best interest rates. By placing her savings in high-yield accounts, she could earn more on her money and offset the effects of inflation. Grandma understood that even a small increase in interest rates could make a significant difference over time. Next, we have tip number 10. Invest in education and skills. Grandma believed in the power of knowledge and personal growth. During times of high inflation, she would invest in her own education or learn new skills that increased her earning potential. By continually improving herself, she could adapt to changing economic conditions and enhance her financial stability. Now, let's discover Grandma's tips for frugal living and resourcefulness during high inflation. Chapter 3. Frugal living and resourcefulness. Tip number 11, reduce energy consumption. Grandma would be mindful of her energy usage. She would turn off lights when not in use, unplug appliances, and use natural light whenever possible. By reducing her energy consumption, she could save on utility bills, especially during times when prices were rising. Next up, tip number 12, make do with less. When faced with high inflation, Grandma would embrace a minimalist mindset. She would declutter her home and focus on living with less. By prioritizing quality over quantity and finding contentment in simplicity, she could live within her means and save money. Moving on to tip number 13, repurpose and reuse. Grandma was a pro at repurposing and reusing items. She would find creative ways to give new life to old belongings, reducing the need for buying new. From repurposing glass jars for storage to transforming old clothes into quilts or cleaning rags, she was resourceful in maximizing the value of what she already had. Tip number 14 is cook from scratch. Grandma rarely relied on pre-packaged foods. Instead, she would cook meals from scratch using basic ingredients. This not only allowed her to save money but also gave her control over the quality and nutritional value of her meals. Grandma knew that homemade meals were not only more economical but also healthier. Next, we have tip number 15, community support. Grandma understood the strength of community during challenging times. She would participate in community initiatives like shared gardens, tool libraries, or bulk buying cooperatives. By pooling resources and supporting one another, the community could withstand the pressures of high inflation together. Let's move on to the fourth chapter, managing debt and expenses. Chapter 4, managing debt and expenses. Tip number 16, avoid high-interest debt. Grandma knew the dangers of high-interest debt. During times of inflation, she would avoid taking on unnecessary debt and prioritize paying off existing debts. By staying out of high-interest debt traps, she maintained control over her finances and avoided unnecessary financial burdens. Next up, tip number 17, negotiate and seek alternatives. When faced with rising prices, Grandma would negotiate for better deals or seek alternatives. Whether it was negotiating rent, finding lower-cost alternatives for essential services, or exploring cost-saving options, she understood the power of being proactive and resourceful. Moving on to tip number 18, prioritize essential expenses. Grandma would prioritize essential expenses like food, shelter, and healthcare. She would make sure these needs were met before allocating funds to non-essential items. By focusing on the necessities, she could navigate high inflation without compromising her well-being. Tip number 19 is avoid impulse purchases. Grandma rarely made impulsive purchases. She would take the time to consider her buying decisions, weigh the pros and cons, and avoid unnecessary splurges. By practicing delayed gratification, she could differentiate between essential purchases and fleeting wants. And finally, tip number 20, stay informed and adapt. Grandma would stay informed about economic trends and adapt her financial strategies accordingly. She would read financial strategies accordingly. She would read financial news, listen to experts, and seek advice from trusted sources. By staying ahead of the curve, she could make informed decisions and protect her financial well-being. And there you have it, folks. Grandma's 20 best money tips for surviving high inflation. These timeless pieces of wisdom can help us navigate challenging economic times and protect our financial future. Have you learned any valuable money tips from your own grandparents? We'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more frugal living and financial advice. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, even in times of high inflation, there are ways to thrive and make the most of your resources. Stay tuned for more frugal adventures, and until next time, take care and save wisely.